Welcome into Boxing Scene Today. Well, it was supposed to be a big fight in a couple weeks. That's right. Jake Paul versus Gervonta Davis. Now it looks like it might not happen after a civil suit against Gervonta Davis for, you guessed it, domestic violence. Looks like it may have derailed the Netflix fight that was very much anticipated by mostly non-boxing fans. But there has to be a replacement. The show must go on. Who could it possibly be? Well, to discuss it, Jimmy Smith in studio alongside the champ, Paulie Malignaggi, still healing his eyes up, but here anyway. So the first part of the discussion we have to get into is apparently Netflix having cold feet about Gervonta Davis and the civil lawsuit. This is a guy, Paulie, who has a history of domestic violence arrests. Of course, we have it on video, him assaulting his then-girlfriend inside a basketball game. The idea that they got cold feet now, as a fan, I went, he's been in trouble for years. So a bit surprising to me that they would sign this fight in the first place if that was a concern.
Yeah, and it seems to be stemming from something that had already happened prior, but there's a civil lawsuit now based on an action that kind of was already publicly known before. By the way, my eye's covered from the poke I caught in the eye. I have to cover my right eye.
Still healing.
I can see out of both eyes, guys. It looks worse than what it is. With this, I don't want anybody to think like I'm blind over here. I can see out of both eyes. I just can't read out of the right eye. So I have to keep it out of sunlight so that hopefully it heals the right eye. The left eye's fine, but granted, what am I going to be, Mr. Eye Patch? You don't want to do that. So I'll just put on glasses that give it a more even look. Anyway, what I'm saying is, I didn't really care for this show. I didn't really care for this fight. It was a little bit sideshow-esque, but I also didn't want to see it come undone this way, where it's going to continue, but now Gervonta has to lose out on this. I wasn't crazy about him doing this, and everybody knows my opinion on this, but I also don't want to see it sidetracked based on this either. You know what I mean? It's because it's I don't know. It's like damn if you do, damn if you don't. He had already had this history. He's trying to be better, and this is something that had already happened in the past, right? I mean, this was already known when they signed.
Yeah, he wasn't arrested.
He did this prior to this being signed, so you already knew this happened. It was regurgitated as a civil suit, but it was already something that everybody knew had happened in the past. So it's not like something new happened after he signed the fight. So that's what I don't understand, and that's why I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that the kids still lose out on it that way for that reason. Because I don't know, to me, it doesn't add up. It already happened. You knew it happened, then you made the fight anyway. So now, based on something you already knew happened, now you're just saying, oh, no, because this happened, we're not going to do the fight. But you knew already in the first place.
Yeah, the history was already there.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And for this particular situation, by the way, mind you, the girl now is coming with a civil suit.
Yes.
She probably saw that he signed the Jake Paul fight and, the Jake Paul exhibition. Now he's going to make more money. Let's sue him. You should have let him get the payday first if that was what you were after, at least in the first place. Because, he's made money in the past, but he's not going to get that payday now. Obviously, the reason you set the civil... There's obviously a reason why the civil suit comes now of all times. His name's in the headlines for the Jake Paul fight. So this Momo thinks that the money's already in the bank. It's not in the bank until you do the show, and now the show's off. So if that's what you were after... You cut your own possible winnings and fractionalize them.
Right, and what we're looking at now is it looks like Netflix has moved on. They want a different opponent. The problem is, Paulie, and we have a list, of course, Boxing Scene Today, Lance Pugmire doing a list of possible replacements. Paulie, before we get into the actual names, what kind of person would take this fight? They're saying it would be delayed maybe to December, but this idea that are you already in shape? Is it a fighter who's not in shape right now? Is it someone getting ready for a fight? Well, but you want him beatable, but not going to embarrass Jake Paul?
But sellable enough, marketable enough. Listen, Jake is very good at, I always say, Jake doesn't set up fights, but he stacks the deck. There's a difference. You can't blame Jake for, personally, me, and everybody thinks these fights are set up. I've never thought they were set up. The way I read the situation is the deck is stacked enough where Jake hedges himself and he's able to win. This is an exhibition, so you don't have to do that. I mean, granted, maybe the replacement becomes a real fight. I don't know. That's something to consider. Maybe this becomes more interesting if it's a real fight. If it's a guy he gets and it's a real fight, I guess that remains to be determined. I don't know, man. But when it comes to a Jake Paul, it's like Jordan Belfort in Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not fucking leaving. The show goes on. Gervonta Davis is out, but the show goes on. Jake Paul's still going. I don't know. Could it be Ryan Garcia? That's a name possible. I know Oscar De La Hoya said no, he's not going to let it happen, and Oscar has Ryan under contract. Granted, money talks, BS walks. They could be big guys like Joshua and Ngannou, but they might be too dangerous for Jake even out of shape, right? So who is the replacement? Because like I said, the show goes on. Jake's going to make it happen. So who is the show? Well, or do we go outside of boxing again and go to an MMA guy? We're talking boxing, but could be an MMA guy. He could go back to doing that because it's a replacement. Maybe you get like a Paddy Pimblett or something. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there.
From the MMA side, from the UFC side, any name that you're sitting here at home and you know a UFC name, they're under contract. UFC owns them. Not going to let them out unless the UFC said so. So if you're under contract with the UFC's got to sign off on it. When he fought Ben Askren, he was still under contract with the UFC had to sign off on it. So this idea that...
But they do sign off on it.
They do sometimes. It can happen, but they are under contract. Let's dive a little bit into Ryan Garcia simply because the crossover name, right? It would be probably, for the non-boxing boxing fan, for the casual, it would be the biggest name, small enough so that Jake Paul wouldn't feel, though he is a power puncher, that he doesn't fear the power necessarily. There would still be a size disparity. We don't know about his preparation. It's always up and down, even if he has a fight scheduled. Would that be the biggest get for Jake Paul as far as fan appeal? Would it be Ryan Garcia?
As in the Western Hemisphere, I think so. I think so. But just like you said, Dana White has to sign off on it. The UFC has to sign off on it. With Ryan Garcia, Oscar De La Hoya has to sign off on it. So you have the same situation there. But again, if there's enough money, I think both sides sign off on it. Whether it's Dana and the UFC or whether it's Oscar and Golden Boy, you get enough money there. They'll do a sideshow. That's what we've seen, especially in this generation. We've noticed this. Can Ryan be ready in a certain amount of time? I think if you push the fight back, it's possible. I think there would be... Ryan might generate more views, honestly. It might generate more views. But I'll throw you another wild card. Because I think if you want to throw Ryan in, you make it a bigger promotion and you have to announce it way more in advance. Like, I think it's almost a waste if you use Ryan as a last-minute replacement. Because you don't get to maximize the promotion. I think you'd rather maximize the promotion and use Ryan in a whole promotion from the get-go. So personally, there's also this guy that tweeted about Jake Paul not long ago. He's a boxer from India, and he's kind of average. He has a loss to I think Cameron Zepeda, not the Zepeda that lost to
not William Zepeda.
Yeah, not the one that lost to Shakur Stevenson. He's lost to the other Zepeda. I forgot his name. Pretty good fighter too. Fringe contender. He's a little bit aged now, but he stopped this guy. His name's Nurjat Goyat or something, and he's from India. And he tweeted at Jake Paul after one of Jake Paul's fights, and he got like 25 million likes or responses. He's got a lot of followers on Instagram. I think again, as far as last minute replacements go, maybe a guy like that Goyat, could jump in. I mean, Jake responded to him, so obviously. It means Goyat is limited enough and small enough, which he's both, to fit the bill of a Jake Paul opponent. Again, stacking the deck, not setting up. When you stack the deck enough, you don't need to set things up. That's why people have to stop with the fights are set up. You stack the deck enough, you don't have to set them up. And there's nothing illegal about stacking the deck. This is how even in real boxing they stack the deck. They make rings smaller, make rings hard ring or soft ring, depending on who they need to have the advantage. Boxing stacks the deck regardless, but. And it comes to Jake Paul, maybe they're a little bit more stacked, and then you don't see it from the naked eye on television, so you think that you're watching a setup fight. No, the decks get stacked just enough. And with Goyat, I think you have enough of a deck stack as well, where he's small enough and limited enough. Maybe he's a last minute guy as well. But maybe even with Goyat, it would be a waste because maybe with Goyat you do that in Asia, Yeah. So. I don't know. I'm just mentioning him because it's a guy Jake has responded to in the past, and we're mentioning Ryan because hey, it's Ryan. In the Western Hemisphere, he pulls numbers and he's a big deal. But I also think both of those guys probably may deserve their own promotion, and it wouldn't be so well if it was last minute replacement. I think this last minute replacement may be a guy like the guy Jake knocked out a couple fights ago who had a good record, a good boxing record, but he was actually horrible.
Yeah.
I forgot his name. That's actually...
I can't even remember his name right now either. Right.
Not that it matters, but that's actually when Goyat tweeted at Jake and Jake responded. It was after that win. So I'm thinking it's probably hedging more to something of a guy we may not really be crazy about.
Well, let's look a little bit outside of the box. Number 6 on the list by Lance Pugmire is Andre Ward, who has talked about coming back to do as a Hall of Famer. We all know about his resume, one of the greatest of all time. But even a fighter like that, provided that he has stayed in shape, he hasn't completely fallen off, he's stayed fit, too much. Yeah. To say the least. Also, a big fighter. He was at light heavyweight at one point. This idea that physically too much for Jake Paul, too much skill. Andre Ward, do you think that's off the table?
Yeah, I think that's just clickbait. Mentioning Andre Ward is just clickbait. There's no way, because Andre's been talking too much about coming back at times. He hedges at it. He may never come back. I mean, Andre's been teasing it the whole time.
Right.
He may never come back, but Andre teases it just enough, consistently enough, that you got to worry that he's in the gym on the side and actually getting in shape. So therefore, doing a training camp isn't far fetched. If they push the fight back and there's a 6-week training camp, it wouldn't be far fetched anymore if he's keeping in mild shape on his own. Because he teases a comeback enough to where you have to at least think this guy might be in the gym 3 days a week just on his own, not saying nothing. You know what I mean? So therefore, a 6-week training camp to get ready for Jake Paul. Piece of cake.
Muscle memory, he'd be right back to it.
So, too dangerous. I think that's clickbait.
Also, this idea that Andre Ward wasn't one of those guys like a Roy Jones Jr. who relied on his explosiveness, his physicality. He was technically a very, very sound boxer. He wouldn't have to, he isn't a guy who's going to go off a cliff in retirement. Style-wise, hands up, chin down, good combination. It wouldn't be hard for him to get back into a camp, yeah?
Yeah, it wouldn't. And like I said, I especially if he's already maybe keeping in mild shape, I think it wouldn't be hard. And again, for Jake, it's not a world-class opponent. A 6-week training camp for a guy like Ward, like you said, muscle memory. Don't see it happening.
Yeah, that would be the guy that it would be far too dangerous to fight. But speaking of dangerous fights, got to mention him. He's on the list at number 4. Terrence Crawford, 168 pounds, his last time out. Of course, naturally, maybe closer to 160, 154. But the pound-for-pound best right now, there's no other way to see it because he's in phenomenal shape. He's at the apex of his powers. He'd make Jake Paul look absolutely ridiculous if they got in the ring.
Yeah, that's another clickbait. Oh, who made this list? Lance?
Lance did it. They're all possibilities in here.
Get out of here. What possibility? These are all clickbait. What's possibility? Right. And when Terrence is training all year round, even when he's on vacation, he still finds a gym to work out at. Even if he doesn't go at the intensity of a training camp, he's always, not far from being in a position to start a training camp at any given point. So again, I think it's clickbait. Plus, we just saw the way Terrence's level is at right now. He's at a very high level, completely outclassed Canelo Alvarez. Again, this is clickbait. I don't see it happening. And once again, I'll reiterate, I think it's going to be a guy who has mild fame and not as big as these guys we're talking about. Because the last minute opponent, it'd be a waste if it's somebody too famous, because you could get the whole promotion out of it instead of a partial promotion.
Well, you can kind of roll them together, the big punchers, Ngannou, and of course Anthony Joshua. Different levels of boxing. We saw what happened when they got in the ring with one another. Joshua knocking out Ngannou. But do you think any big puncher, even when we're talking about these guys, any big puncher is off the table?
I think so. Yeah, right. I think so. There's no need for a big puncher. Jake is in prospect mode. I always talk about, the guy.
He's eternally in prospect mode.
I always talk about the genius that made my early matches in my career. Johnny Boz, rest in peace. He was a genius matchmaker, and he always used to say, when it comes to a prospect, he goes, "Why match a prospect with a puncher? They'll get there later." He goes, "You can match them with dangerous opponents, fighters that build them, opponents that build them. But why a puncher? A puncher, it takes 3 years to build a prospect. It takes 10 seconds to ruin one." And Jake, honestly, being built as a prospect, granted a very famous prospect, but still a prospect, don't think there's any reason to match him with a puncher, no matter how limited the puncher might be, because a puncher can always land that lucky shot, and so I don't see a puncher getting the call for Jake, not just last minute. I don't think ever. And you talk about Gervonta's a puncher, Ryan Garcia's a puncher. Yes, they're much smaller, so it's a different.
Tiny punches, right?
Also, it's an exhibition, bigger gloves,
Last question I have for you. If we do think it's going to be Ryan Garcia, how much do you think it would repair the relationship between Oscar De La Hoya and Ryan Garcia if he's allowed? If Oscar went, okay, you can do this one, bank God knows how many millions of dollars. Do you think it repairs that relationship? It would be worth Oscar De La Hoya doing that to mend those fences a bit? Yes or no?
That song that used to be really famous when I was a teenager, all about the Benjamins, baby. The Benjamins
makes everybody friends, right?
Yeah, it makes everybody. Everybody will be happy with a lot of Benjamins, but I am not sure that you do Ryan Garcia now. I think it's a waste. I think you could do Ryan later and have a mega promotion, press tour, all this stuff. Why do it now? Especially if Ryan's in talks to get the Barrios fight. It wins that fight with his eyes closed. So then he becomes a welterweight champion. You can sell it just like the Gervonta Davis fight, but a bigger name in Ryan. Ryan's a more granted, Gervonta's more established in boxing, but Ryan is a big name overall. I think you just do it then. Yeah, I think it's a waste if you do it now.
Well, we have, of course, the 14th was the original date. Wait for that to be pushed back. That should give us some idea of what's happening. But Jake Paul does make a lot of news in boxing as he picks an opponent. We'll discuss it here. Boxing Scene Today. Thank you so much for joining us. Find out why millions are watching.
She should have waited for Gervonta to fight him first.
Yeah.